Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dairyland Frights, paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. My name is John, and I'm here today with my two co-hosts, Brooke and Megan. How you guys doing today?
Very good. I'm excited. This is a really cool episode. It's our 10th episode, which I know you're going to talk about. Don't want to take your thunder away, but I'm very excited about this episode.
Megan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very unfamiliar with this subject we're going to talk about today, so I'm excited to learn more from Brooke.
Yeah.
So today we are super excited and super pumped because this is our 10th episode. So we're really excited about this because, well, it's always hard in the podcast game to know how far you're going to get and, what you're going to do. But first of all, I like to say thanks to my co-hosts, Brooke and Megan.
Thanks, John.
You guys have been the greatest, and we have so much fun. Even your dad says we're having fun, Megan.
Yes. Yeah, he's one of our best listeners.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tom, by the way. And I look forward to more spooky episodes. So thank you so much, ladies. So
yes, thank you,
let's
John.
get right to it. This week, we're covering something really interesting. It's the Mothman, but you're saying, yeah, I know the Mothman. Yeah, I've heard about it. Not like this. It's probably not the Mothman you're familiar with. This Mothman wasn't in West Virginia in the 60s. It's in Chicago today.
Ooh.
And by the way, the Bears suck. Sorry.
Well, yeah, you got to throw that in there.
What can we say?
So, without further ado, this is a great episode, Brooke. Amazing job. So I'm just going to turn it right to you, Brooke. Let's get into this. This is awesome.
Sounds good. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to cover, so I agree. So if you are a fan, this is my little intro. I had to do this because I thought it was fun. If you're a fan of comic books and superhero movies, you may already know that the city of Gotham, Batman's hometown, has a lot in common with Chicago. Christopher Nolan himself even said that Chicago inspired his version of Gotham while writing and directing the Dark Knight trilogy. And for that reason, it almost seems fitting that Chicago has become home to the latest version of a dark-winged crusader, not a Batman, but a Mothman. So, very fun. I want to cover a couple sources that I'm going to be talking about. We'll go more in depth on each of them because one of them specifically is like a very large part of the entire backstory of this phenomenon. But there's actually a Vice article that I'm going to talk about, which is cool. It's cool to see like larger groups and larger, associations talking about this type of thing. So there's a Vice article. There's an NPR. They did a mini podcast that was posted on October of 2019 called "The Case for the Chicago Mothman." So that's a fun listen if you're wanting to learn a little bit more. It's just like goofy. But there's also a website called phantomsandmonsters.com, and this is the big one. So they also have a Google map that the creators of this website have made that it's called the Chicago/Lake Michigan Winged Humanoid Regional Interactive Map. Oh, cool. And it actually pins like every single sighting that has been like documented of this creature over the last about 20 years actually. So
wow.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's like very helpful in putting together all my information. It was awesome. It's a lot to go through. There's about 160 total sightings, so there's a lot. But wow. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I used it a ton, and I'll come back to it and give you a little bit more details about the guy who created it and stuff in a little bit. But first, let's set the scene. I want to briefly talk about Point Pleasant because I know that if you're listening to this and you've heard of Mothman, the Mothman that you're familiar with is probably the Point Pleasant Mothman. So this Mothman was seen very frequently in Point Pleasant, West Virginia between 1966 and 1967. It's really interesting, and I don't want to go too in depth because I'm sure someday we will probably do an episode about this. But essentially, there were probably 200 sightings of this creature in a very short period of time. And all of these sightings kind of led up to the Silver Bridge collapse, which is one of the most deadly bridge collapses in American history. It killed 46 people.
Wow.
And the Silver Bridge actually connected Point Pleasant across the river to Ohio. So it's like right across from Ohio. And it was like on Christmas or like close to Christmas. There were tons of people like packed onto this bridge because they were coming back from doing holiday shopping. And the bridge collapsed, sending a bunch of people into the water. And again, 46 people ended up dying. And it kind of like it got tied to this Mothman thing because after the bridge collapsed, the Mothman sighting pretty much stopped, which was very odd. And a lot of people kind of thought that maybe Mothman was some sort of bad omen, which was kind of interesting. But now Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a huge tourist attraction. They have a statue, they have a museum, an annual festival. He's a burrito. I actually went to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, like a couple years ago with my husband, and we have a bunch of pictures from it. But yeah, there's a sign like this burrito store that had a sign that said like Mothman burritos now available.
I thought you said festival burrito, like it's a festival burrito. Like there's
no,
festival burrito.
No, two separate things.
Festival and a
burrito. Things, yes. The festival, draws in a lot of people every year. And like Point Pleasant is a pretty small town. I mean, by West Virginia standards, it's probably like fairly decent size, but it's a small town, and Mothman's definitely a traffic driver for them. You can also have Mothman officiate your wedding. Very fun.
Man, I missed out.
Yeah. And there was even a movie that came out, I believe, in 2002 with Richard Gere called The Mothman
Prophecies.
Yeah, it's cool. And even at the museum, they have like different props and stuff from the movie, which is fun. So yeah, it's very cool. And again, we will go more into depth on that in a later episode, I'm sure. So suffice it to say that this is the more popular version of Mothman, but the Chicago Mothman has been really interesting, and it's a lot more recent. So sightings officially started in 2011. There were actually instances now of people kind of dating back their sightings, and they go back as far as 1999 was the earliest one that is at least on the map that has all the pins on it. So it goes back a little bit further than 2011, but 2011 was like the official start. And then it peaked like hard in 2017. So of the like 160 sightings, 56 of them were in 2017. So
that's a lot.
That was definitely the biggest year. But they've been continuing fairly consistently since then. So there's been like 15 to 20 pretty much every year since 2017. So they're still pretty common, and actually the most recent sighting that I could find was from February 5th of 2023. So as we're recording this, that was like a week ago. So very, very recent. Yeah, very interesting. So we will talk about that one. But also, according to the Singular 14 Society, this is the largest concentration of flying humanoid sightings since the Mothman phenomenon hit Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the 1960s. So it's definitely kind of similar, kind of different because it's in a like major metropolitan area, but it's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the sightings and kind of patterns that we'll see throughout what we'll talk about. So many of the sightings tend to happen near bodies of water, specifically Lake Michigan. So Lon Strickler, we'll talk about him quite a bit. He's actually the one who created that Monsters and Phantoms website, and his like group also created that map. So he actually refers to this creature also as the Lake Michigan Mothman, often because there are sightings as far north of Chicago, or as far north of Chicago as Milwaukee. So there are sightings in Milwaukee. And then as far west as, I thought this was fun, there's actually a couple sightings in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, which we just talked about. Yeah. And
the Mineral Point vampire and Mothman.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, maybe it's all tied together. We just don't know.
I wonder.
It could be. And then as far south and east of Chicago as the Prairie Creek Reservoir, which is east of Indianapolis, kind of near Muncie, Indiana. So this is quite a ways away from Chicago, but it's I'll talk about this later. There's some really interesting sightings that are all very like cohesive that were in that area specifically. And then along with water, there are also a lot of sightings near airports, and we'll go into detail about this, but there are so many sightings that happened near O'Hare, and that seems to be kind of like the more modern, like recent sightings are like all near O'Hare Airport, but again, we'll talk about that. So when talking about like how the Mothman is described in all these sightings, so I looked at like 100 of them. I didn't read through every single one, but I looked through a lot, and looking through all of them, this is kind of the general description of what this creature looks like. So generally is described as being between 6 and 10 feet tall. Most people seem to say around 7 feet. That seems to be like the most common one, like slightly taller than a tall person, basically. And then his wingspan, they say that it's always like much larger than he is tall. So like between 10 and 15 feet normally. So very large wingspan. Also, the creature has glowing eyes, mostly described as red or like amber. So you'll hear like red, yellowish, orangish, amber. Most generally, there are certain ones that say green, but these seem to be like in the Milwaukee area, actually. So it's kind of interesting. And I know Lon Strickler has actually said that he thinks that there are like multiple variations of the creature depending on like the location. So
that's not scary,
right? Yeah, that there's just a family of Mothmen like flying around the
Mothman. Great.
Yeah. But it does seem like the ones that occur in Chicago, mostly they describe like reddish glowing eyes or amber glowing eyes. Mostly also they report this creature as having leather-like skin similar to a bat. But some of them, and we will talk about at least one, which I'm excited about, some of them do say that it's like fur and that the creature is brown. So mostly in Chicago, it's like a black, leathery bat-like creature. Outside of Chicago, it kind of varies a little bit, which again is why he thinks that it's multiple different types of
I can
creature.
see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then a big thing is the majority of them say that the creature doesn't have like a neck, like has a small protruding head, kind of like a moth or an owl maybe, but not really like a neck and a head like a person. Like the body shape is like a person, like human like legs and arms and torso, but the head is like not really as human like. So and then in terms of behavior, this is fun. These are some things that Mothman seems to frequently do. So he stares at people ominously. Sometimes he makes clicking and screeching noises. Those are the common descriptions of the noises that this creature makes. Like rapid clicking or like high-pitched screeching. Interesting. Yes. He also dives off of buildings and rooftops. He swoops towards people's cars frequently.
Ooh.
Great.
Yeah, fun stuff, you know. Sometimes he gives people a feeling of dread, especially when he's staring at them ominously. And he will frequently be seen flying towards Lake Michigan and disappearing into the night.
So Brooke, we kind of brought that up on the Goat Man, right? Remember, was it the Goat Man, or what was the other cryptid that these two father and son were seen when they saw the creature?
I was just about to say that, John. That was the lacrosse man bat. And
yeah.
The more you talk about it, Brooke, there's so many different like similarities that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
That is very true.
That
Very
sense of dread, people getting sick when they're around it, swooping up into the air. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very similar. And I was actually that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about that, because I was like, oh, I wonder if the man bat is on his map. And it's not. I think it's like a little too far out of the range that he is like pinning things, but I think it's like it's very similar. So I feel like it all kind of ties together. And again, maybe there are like more of these creatures than we could even know about. So fun stuff. Something else interesting to note is that quite a few sightings, especially toward, interestingly, the Rockford, Illinois area, so a little bit outside of the Chicago metropolitan area, they describe the sightings as like being like a gargoyle or a demon, which I thought is odd, because that's kind of like a very specific thing. Like a gargoyle to me has a very unique look to it, but it's mentioned quite a bit. I would say like at least 20 of the 160 sightings say like, oh, I saw a gargoyle, which is interesting.
Are they the same? Who knows?
Maybe I don't know.
Completely different things they're seeing.
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting.
So a quick fun fact about gargoyles. they're not bad. They're actually good. You're supposed to put gargoyles on your building to protect you from evil spirits.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
Maybe it's a good omen. Who knows?
Maybe. You never know.
Okay.
You
Hey,
know?
look at us. We cracked the case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing too. I think I was gonna mention this at the end, but I did look into see if like any sort of like bridge collapse or like structural collapses happened in the Chicago area, like in 2017 specifically or 2018. And I couldn't find anything. So I don't. Yeah, I was even looking up like any mass casualty event. It's like I felt very like I don't know. It felt very ominous to like look this stuff up, but I could not really find anything that would be like associated with this. But but yeah. So anyway, we're gonna talk about the timeline coming up, which is very fun and interesting. So again, I wanted to give a shout out to Lon Strickler for compiling all this. In his interactive map, he kind of like has he has a lot of accounts that he was like someone specifically called him and gave him the details, but he also takes other people's accounts from like other sources too and compiles it all into the same thing. So it's very complete, which is really nice. Lon Strickler also, he is the author of multiple books. He kind of seems like he's gonna be like a new character that we talk about a lot as we kind of branch into Illinois, you know, similar to our commonly occurring characters in the Wisconsin area. So it'd be kind of fun. So he one of the books that he wrote is called Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids, but he's written other books as well. And he is a self-described Fortean researcher, which I wanted to look into this like phrase because it kept popping up.
Right.
So apparently the phrase Fortean researcher, it comes from this guy named Charles Fort, and he lived from 1874 to 1932, and he was an American writer and researcher who specialized in anomalous phenomena. And the terms Fortean are sometimes used now to characterize like these various types of phenomena. So that comes from his last name, Fort. And then this comes directly from Wikipedia, and this sounds really cool. So reported events in his writings include teleportation, which is a term that Charles Fort is actually credited with inventing. Yeah, which is kind of cool. Falls of frogs, fishes, and inorganic materials, spontaneous human combustion, ball lightning, another term explicitly used by Fort, poltergeist events, unaccountable noises and explosions, levitation, unidentified flying objects, and unexplained disappearances. So this guy sounds very fun and cool.
Yeah. I want to read that.
I know. I'm really curious to like learn more about this guy. And like maybe we could do like a whole episode just about him and like his past and stuff. Yeah, he sounds super cool. So a lot of people will call themselves Fortean researchers, kind of like in honor of this guy, kind of like continuing, I guess, his legacy and all that. Lon Strickler himself also works closely with the Singular Fortean Society. They have a whole website too where they also document different people's experiences of cryptid sightings, UFO sightings, that sort of thing. So he's part of their network. And something cool is that this society is actually based in Madison. So yeah, definitely think we should do some more like looking into them, seeing if we could, you know, talk to them. But I put some links in our so very cool. He again also runs the website Phantoms and Monsters. It's frequently updated with real life cryptid experiences, not just of Mothman, but of other ones too. His website does look like it was created in 2001, very similar to the W files from a couple episodes ago. But it is frequently updated. Like he updated it just a couple days ago for that February one. But yeah, it's very interesting. So Lon told the Chicago Reader that he encountered Mothman when he was a child in Pennsylvania. So he's been kind of determined to learn more about it ever since. And like I said, he believes that there are at least 3 flying humanoids across the Chicago area due to the various locations of the sightings and like pockets of the sightings, like different concentrations in certain areas. And also some accounts of people seeing multiple beings at one time, which is kind of interesting as well. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I put like, okay, now time for this wild timeline. So the sightings on the map are not necessarily in chronological order. So like the first ones are actually in 2011, but then, it might be like 2012 and someone comes to him and he's
Sure.
like, hey, I had this experience in 1999. So it's like kind of
Right.
out of order.
Yeah,
So
I
I
get it.
tried to like put everything in order so that I could get a good idea of like how many sightings occurred in each year. So I think I sort of put that together, but we'll see how accurate it
We'll give you
is.
the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, it's like sort of accurate. But the
We
first
get
one, the first one that I could for sure find was from 1999. And this was actually not reported to Lon himself until 2018. So much like a long time after this woman had this experience, but this was an account of an elderly woman who lives in Rockford, Illinois. And this is one of those ones where she specifically describes a creature as a gargoyle. So she says that her husband and a friend were sitting out like on their porch and just kind of like enjoying a drink, sitting outside, and they saw this flying red-eyed gargoyle. It was 7 feet tall, had a really large wingspan, and she said that it had small cat-like ears and leathery skin like a bat. And she said it was flying slowly near a tree, and then it moved in the distance towards some pines. She said it didn't notice them looking at it, and then eventually it just like disappeared. She said it almost like not even like disappeared behind the trees, but disappeared before it got to trees, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I guess she told her son about this like a long time ago, and her son actually knew about Lon and his website. So he recommended that she reach out to him. So she didn't really know about like all this other research that he had done. But her son encouraged her to reach out. And this also, just kind of a side note, I wanted to mention this, like her talking about this creature flying like slowly. And I think she even mentioned that he only like flapped its wings like once or twice. This seems to be like a very common thing too, is that it has like very slow wing movement or doesn't move its wings at all and flies like very slowly throughout the sky. So it's kind of interesting. That'll keep like kind of popping up, that like similar description. So after that, there are at least one sighting in each of these years. So 2001, 2002, 2006, 7, and 2010. So at least one sighting is in each of those years. But I'm not going to mention all of them, but I did want to mention though, there was one from 2002 that was also from Rockford. So I thought that was kind of interesting because only like 3 years after the other woman's sighting. And this person described a winged man bat flying towards her car that was 6 feet tall with a 12-foot wingspan. So, So again, just wanted to mention that. I know, not scary at all. It seems to happen a lot. The flying, swooping down towards a car.
So can I just? What is your? Why would like how birds sometimes fly towards your car and everything like that, or they get out of the way at the last minute, right? You'll be driving down the road and there's a bird eating dead deer meat or whatever.
Right.
And they get close to it and they all take off, right? Like, why do you think the Chicago Mothman goes towards a car? Do you think they're threatened? Do you think they think it's something else? I mean, because that's pretty weird that it would do that.
It is weird. I do like from the other accounts we'll talk about, I do feel like maybe it's like a feeling of being threatened because they do seem to kind of just like mind their business until they like notice a person is nearby. So it might just be like them, maybe they were just doing their Mothman thing and then they see a car and they get like annoyed and like want to scare it away or something. Yeah, because that seems like kind of a very frequent experience. And if someone's not in a car, then it'll just stare at them ominously. So it's like, in some
there's
way,
a difference.
Yeah, regardless of the situation, it does seem, it does seem like he's trying to intimidate people a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting. So 2011 was when kind of like more frequent sightings started occurring. So there were actually 7 sightings in 2011. Wow. And the first one it's actually the very first sighting documented by Lon. So if you look at the map, this is the first one that actually pops up. So this was in August of 2011 and August 22nd. And this one was actually very interesting. And there is like a photograph of this that I put into our outline. We can add it to our Instagram as well so other people can see it. But basically, there was a man, and this was near the Chicago Midway Airport. So this is not O'Hare. This is a separate airport that's like in the downtown area.
Right.
Mhm.
And he described a bat-like object. And so apparently what had happened, so he was at this, like, I think it was like a car dealership, and there was a big statue of a guy, and he noticed that these, like, teenage girls were, like, pointing at the statue and laughing, and he was like, oh, what's going on? So they left, and then he went over there to see what they were laughing at, and from a certain angle it looked like one of the statue's hands was, like, popping through his pants, so it looked like a little risque.
Yeah.
So he was like, he thought
Okay.
it was funny too, so he, like, took out his camera and started taking a picture of the statue so he could, like, show his friends or whatever.
Right.
And he actually didn't notice the thing in the background at first until he went back and looked at the pictures. And so you'll see the picture at the bottom if you want to scroll down and look at it. But it looks like I don't know, kind of like a bat, I guess. I think it's interesting because it's like a lot of people have looked at this and say, like, oh, this is like a kite. And it definitely could be. Like, I do definitely think that it could just be a kite. But it's interesting to me that it almost looks like lighter at the tips of its wings,
Right.
as though, like,
It does.
actually,
Yes, it
like as
does.
though they're see-through or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and he had no idea what this was, and I don't remember exactly why he decided to reach out to. I think he maybe reached out to Lon specifically. But you could even see the statue on the left and why he took the picture in the first place, because his hand does look like it's out of his pants. But
Right.
but yeah, so this was a very interesting experience this guy had.
Right.
So he reported it. And yeah, so I don't know. What do you guys think it looks like, I guess?
I'm just amazed he didn't even see that when he was taking the photo.
Yeah.
It's a very
Right.
odd shape. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
not
looking at it too.
natural to me.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't really see any. Oh, well, this could be photoshopped out or whatever, but still, I don't see like a string or anything pulling down. With a kite, you
Right.
see string, it's pretty obvious. And kites don't really go like this. They kind of, they're not as, how do you say, as solid. Because, if you're flying a kite when you're a little kid, they're all over the place and they're cheaply made. And, it's not going to look like this per se. But again, interesting. Makes you wonder on this one. So
for sure. And it definitely looks like dark. Like, I don't know. I usually kites are like bright colors and like kind of fun. And
Yeah.
yeah, it
Plus,
doesn't.
I feel like the wings on it, they almost look like they're meant to be like gliding wings.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know if they look like flapping wings, because it almost looks like I don't know, like a base jumper, how they have those big suits on.
Yeah,
like
but I think those flying squirrel suits, I don't think they weren't developed around this time. I could be wrong, but again, for a person to be doing this, I don't know why you would
the shape is
weird.
weird.
In the middle of wherever, Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love that, Brooke. That is really cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it's cool that it's the very first sighting, I guess, and there's photographic evidence. But yeah, so after this, it's interesting. There were there were 6 more sightings in 2011. I'm going to talk about 2 other ones. So this next one occurred. So both of the other ones, so September 30th and October 14th were the next 2 sightings. So pretty closely after the initial one, which was August 22nd. But the next 2 both occur on the University of Illinois Chicago campus. And the first one on September 30th, I think, is really interesting. So there was a college student, and she describes that her roommate and her were both getting ready to go out downtown. And her roommate freaked out all of a sudden, and she says that she saw a pair of orange eyes staring at her through the window of their 3rd floor apartment.
Oh no.
And which is terrifying. But her roommate was kind of the person who was telling the story. Her roommate was kind of like, I don't know that you really saw that. Like, it was probably just street lights. Calm down. So she was kind of like trying to help her calm down. And then she went into a different room, and then the person telling the story, the other roommate, walked by, and she actually saw the same thing. And then she saw the silhouette of a creature attached to these eyes, and then it flew away. And so now they're both freaking out. And interestingly, they actually had a group of male friends, male students who were their friends, who were going to meet them so that they could all go out together. And I guess these guys showed up 10 minutes later, and they're all freaking out, and they're like, oh my god, we just saw the craziest thing outside. And they said that they had seen like a big man-sized creature flying in the vicinity, and then it went and like landed on top of a basketball hoop, and they said at least like 8 people saw this.
Wow.
And so then like all of them were freaking out. They didn't even end up going out that night because they were so freaked out by the whole situation. So very interesting. And then there was another story that happened shortly after this on October 14th, also on the college campus. And this student also described kind of something similar, but I thought what was interesting is she said that it looked like an oversized sugar glider with red glowing eyes, which I thought was
yes.
What's a sugar glider?
Yeah, because that's what that picture looks like to me, is similar to
I could totally agree with that.
Yeah. So very interesting. There were a couple other sightings in 2011 as well, but I didn't document all of them. And after 2011, the sightings kind of died down a little bit. There was at least one sighting in every year between 2011 and 2016. So all 5 of those years, there was at least one, usually 2 or 3. But I didn't really document any of them because they were just kind of one-off things. But 2017 is where things really popped off. So there were 55 sightings in 2017.
Whoa, holy Mothman.
That's a lot.
It's a ton.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot. And I did not get a chance to look at every single one. So I kind of just picked a couple random ones that I thought were interesting. But again, these sightings too were like pretty concentrated to the downtown Chicago area. So like in other years, they kind of were like, maybe out in Rockford or maybe like further east or further north towards Milwaukee, but the ones in 2017 really were concentrated in like the downtown Chicago area. So the first sighting that happened in 2017 was on April 15th. And this was in a parking lot near the Chicago International Produce Market. And this is an anonymous report because he didn't really want to like be labeled as weird or anything, but he described what he said looked like a giant owl that was at least 7 feet tall with bright yellowish reddish eyes. So again, pretty similar description.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said that 4 or 5 other guys also saw this creature staring at them. And he was like perched up on top of a building and he was staring down at these like 5 guys. And all of them felt like super uneasy. They were just kind of like in this stare off with this creature. And then all of a sudden it took off into the sky. And they said it made the sound of truck brakes, like old like semi brakes that are like kind of worn out, like very screechy.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting because there was actually another sighting in August of 2017 that described the sound in the exact same way. And it was only 1.5 miles from the first sighting, so a little bit more east towards Lake Michigan, but they again like described it the same way, like sounding like old squeaky truck brakes. So kind of interesting. It's cool to me when you see like, I don't know, very specific similarities between different accounts, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the first one, which set off just like a slew of other additional sightings. So there was another sighting near Logan Square, and I wanted to include this one because this was actually documented by Vice. So I wanted to include like some sources that were not the same website. Just to, I guess, so they actually interviewed this guy. So there's a Vice article from 2018 called "People Keep Seeing the Mothman in Chicago." Very, very blunt to the point. But it's like, yeah, I guess they do. So this guy that they interviewed was named John Amatrano, and he believes he saw a Mothman, and he actually described the experience of seeing it as almost similar to how people would describe a pterodactyl. So this creature, that's how big, like he said it was. So it was like had muscular legs, a human-like shape, and flew in a strange swooping motion, like undulating up and down without like flapping its wings. So again, very like gliding and slow, not flapping its wings and like moving that fast. And I like this quote from him. He said, "The reason I said something in the first place is that nobody wants to say anything because they don't want to be perceived as a crackpot or a crazy person. But that doesn't mean that those things don't happen." So I like that he's one of the only people who actually like put his name on it and was like,
good for
like we have his full first and last name, which is good.
Yeah. So a quick side note, Brooke. The one thing we'll have to cover down the road here is people have been seeing pterodactyls in California.
Interesting.
And there's a picture of it recently that maybe if we decide we want to do this, we can share. However, there has been some people having a little fun and
Right.
putting out pterodactyl models per se. And
Right,
flying
I'm
around.
sure.
So not to say this does sound nothing like that, but
Right.
it has been recently. Just a few months ago, I saw an article and the guy took a picture. Looks exactly like a pterodactyl. I mean,
Interesting.
exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. That's yeah.
Interesting. You know. So awesome.
I have
It's
a
happening
question
all
for
over.
you two.
Yeah.
So people keep saying like, "Oh, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be seen as like a crazy person." What would you two do if you saw something like this? It's like, would you share it with other people? And I mean, where would you even know to start? It's like, who do I tell? You know, because some people they keep it to themselves, but it's like, who would make the most sense to tell?
That's a good. I feel like it being where we are, and now that I know what I know, I would reach out to Lon personally. I would probably want to stay anonymous, honestly. Even like being the person that I am, I still think, I would probably stay anonymous. And
I agree.
but I would reach out to Lon if I saw like a Mothman. But it is interesting to me. A lot of people seem to say like, and that's why I think a lot of people reported later than their actual sightings is because they would see something and they would not really know what to say or who to tell. And then maybe like a month later, they're maybe telling someone about it and they were like, oh, you should reach out to this Lon guy. He like has a website about that. So it's almost like eventually they would learn the right person to tell. But I'm sure there's so many people who probably saw something and never knew who to tell and never wanted to say anything. And so they just kind of like never said anything. So
I know who I wouldn't tell: the police, because they would just be like, yeah, okay, keep drinking, buddy. have another beer. Yeah, they wouldn't really do anything. Although in our Mineral Point Vampire, check that podcast out, the police did actually investigate. So
that's true. The police had their own experience. There actually are multiple of these like 160 sightings in Chicago. I think like at least 2 or 3 of them were police officers who had the experiences. I don't know if I specifically called any of them out, but yeah, there's a lot of reputable people, and that's something I'll talk a little bit about later. Okay. But it's very interesting. But yeah, so where was I? Just want to make sure
September
I don't forget
10th.
anything. Oh yeah, September 10th. Okay, so this was interesting. So there were 2 sightings within 1 hour, and both of them like reached out to Lon, and yeah, super interesting. So there was one sighting in Avalon Park. This is in the downtown area, and a man was with one of his friends, and they both observed this like dark object flying high in the sky. At first, they thought it was maybe like a jet, but then they were like, "No, it's moving way too slow to be a jet." And then they kind of were like getting a closer look at it, and they said that it was shaped like a human and it had wings like a large bat. And it was like very slowly flying in a northern direction. And at the time, he wasn't even aware of Lon's website. And I think he like had went to a restaurant or something and was telling someone about it. And they were like, they told him about Lon. And so he reached out to him pretty much like an hour after he had the experience. And so Lon like took down his account. And then literally an hour later, a military veteran in a totally different location. And this person, she had aircraft experience. And so she was very familiar, obviously, with like what jets and airplanes look like and how they operate. And she had a very similar experience in the Douglas neighborhood, which is about 7 miles north of Avalon Park. So remember the first guy said that the creature was flying north at a slow speed. An hour later, it's 7 miles north. She said she saw basically the exact same thing. An unknown being slowly gliding across the sky, dark in color, with wings shaped like a large bat. So like the exact same description. And she said she knew it was not an aircraft or a drone because it wouldn't have been able to maintain that altitude with how slow it was moving.
Right.
Like, so very interesting. So these all happened in 2017. There's so many more sightings in 2017. So again, I think like it'd be fun to kind of come back every once in a while. Like maybe, just here's 5 more sightings of the Mothman because there's so many kind of fun ones. Yeah. Mothman alerts definitely would be fun. What's interesting is that there seems to be kind of like different phases of the sightings too. So again, 2017 was a lot of downtown sightings. There are people seeing the Mothman like near the Willis Tower, Sears Tower. Like I think one guy thought he saw Mothman jump like off the top of the tower. There's
Mm.
there's people like seeing it in like Millennium Park, like very, very local to the downtown area. But then as we move on, it kind of like shifts a little bit. So 2018 had some interesting sightings. So there were 16 sightings in 2018. One of them was the last of 3 sightings that occurred specifically at like a campground and reservoir called Prairie Creek Reservoir near Muncie, Indiana. So I kind of mentioned this before. But what I think is interesting is that like this is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there were 3 very similar sightings that all happened in this one area. So this is the last one, but it was the first one reported. But it was a military veteran who saw a 7-foot tall humanoid flying just above the trees with large bat-like wings. Very, you'll see very similar descriptions over and over again. And it glided with steady, slow speed, didn't flap its wings, and he actually refused to mention it outside of his family until later in the year. He heard of some recent sightings in Gary, Indiana, and so then he finally felt comfortable reaching out to Lon, but he still didn't give his name or anything. But then after his sighting, a couple other people mentioned also seeing something at Prairie Creek Reservoir. So this person said they saw something similar in the winter of 2011, also at dusk, and they saw a man-sized creature crouched by the road, and the creature approached her car and like stood upright, so she got a really good look at it. And said that it was like 7 feet tall, and the creature stepped on her car and then used it to propel itself into the air.
Oh, wow. Dang.
Yeah.
Savage.
Yeah, right? That would be so bizarre. But so she said that this creature had a huge wingspan and glowing yellow eyes, and she never told anyone except her husband. And her husband said that it was probably a bird, like don't like spread this around. But then I guess he saw the article about like, the other person. I know, like what kind of bird would like
what?
That's
the
always
hell of a bird
people,
you got there, lady.
Right? Yeah. 7-foot tall bird with a man's body, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Do you
her husband? Oh yeah. What
do you know if it left any damage on her car?
It did not say that it did, so I don't think it did.
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe it's light on its feet.
Yeah, maybe.
So.
It's interesting. Yeah, so her husband's actually the one who saw an article about the other story that I just mentioned at Prairie Creek Reservoir. And he was like, oh, like crap, maybe my wife didn't just see a bird. And then he actually encouraged his wife to reach out about it, which is funny to me. I'm like, oh, classic, like guy.
Change of heart.
You didn't see that, yeah. But then after both of these stories, a third person reached out to Lon about an experience they had in the summer of 2007. So a couple years before that. So, and it was like sunset. And so Lon actually says that this witness is a well-known, incredible media professional, but again, wanted to stay anonymous. So we don't know their name. But this person said that they saw what looked like a human standing at the end of a dock in the Prairie Creek Reservoir, and it was standing with like its back towards him and one of his friends. And then it turned around and it had glowing yellow eyes. And after looking at them for a couple seconds, it spread its wings, and he said he had a really huge wingspan, and it took off into the sky. He said it was 6 feet tall with a huge wingspan, dark in color. Again, like so many of these sightings. And he also, again, mentioned that it only flapped its wings like once or twice and then like kind of shot into the sky. So again, like very few wing movements, it seems.
Right.
So that was interesting. So those kind of like unique to 2018. There were a lot more sightings, it seems, in 2018 outside the Chicago region, like more in the outskirts.
Yeah.
So 2019, I thought this was interesting. So 3 sightings all happened in Woodstock, Illinois during this year, and they all happened between February and March. And Woodstock is like quite a ways northwest of Chicago, so kind of a little bit closer to like Rockford. So it's not really in like the metropolitan area. But 3 kind of very similar sightings all happened within 3 months. So these encounters are all labeled as large winged bipeds, and the witnesses all describe the creature pretty similarly as being extremely tall with large leathery wings, and that the wings were shaped like a gargoyle's wings. So again, I guess I would explain a gargoyle's wings kind of like a bat's, so it may
Right.
be kind of similar. But the first of these 3 sightings, someone actually found a strange print in the snow
Yeah, I
associated with
saw
this.
that.
Yeah, so I also have a picture of this at the bottom, which again we can
Yeah.
share on Instagram. But
Ooh.
it's if you
Yeah.
look at the
Mhm.
measuring tape, it looks like it's about 19 inches long.
Yep.
So
Whoa.
really large print.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like curved with like 2
Yeah.
large like toes almost. Like it's very
Oh.
strange. So yeah, I don't
Right.
know. What do you think, John?
So this is really interesting to me. Can somebody do the quick math from what, like 2011 to like 2020? I think it's like 80 sightings, maybe more. Am I
Yeah.
off? Okay,
Yeah, no, I
right?
think that's about right. Yeah.
Okay, maybe a little bit more, a little less. My point is, when do you get 80 people to admit something this, I don't want to say outlandish, this is not the right word, but like this kind of out of world experience? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's usually UFOs, right? Oh, I saw a UFO, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, because people are more like in today's world, like, oh, yeah, that happens, especially with the military coming forward and saying, here's some pictures.
Right.
And
Yeah,
we've known about it a long time.
for sure.
But something like this, what blows my mind, Brooke, is that people, first of all, they pretty much have the same description, pretty much have the same feelings, pretty much have the same,
Mhm.
like, I don't know if I should tell me, but
Right.
come forward and talk about this, I think is just, well, good for them, number one,
Mhm.
because I think it's really interesting. And also, I think what's even more interesting is that it's just happening in certain areas that
Yeah.
you don't have like the original Mothman, people going, oh, yeah, I've seen it, blah, blah, blah. Not as much as this. I mean, I've never heard, well, next to Bigfoot,
Right.
I've never heard something like this that's in a certain area where there's so much activity. So
Yeah.
interesting.
It's really interesting. And it's yeah, especially I don't know, with Point Pleasant, like it's almost I feel like the small townness kind of makes more sense that everyone's kind of seeing the same thing because they're all like
Sure.
talking to each other and
Right.
we're
Mhm.
all like, "Oh, I was over here, I was over
Mhm.
there and I saw this
Yeah.
thing." And like it's a town of like 3,000 people, so it kind of makes
Right.
sense that but like Chicago is like the 3rd largest city in the US. It's like people aren't talking to each other about this. Like
No.
they're all
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
individually having these experiences. So it's
Right.
yeah, it's very intriguing. Yeah. And I agree. It's interesting too, seeing like the pockets of like
I
it. You could almost looking at the map see like all the different clusters from each of the years that like it shifted around and wasn't just like it wasn't super sporadic or anything. It was like oh, in this year most of the sightings were in this area, and in this year they were mostly in this area. So
so I have a quick question for Megan. Now be truthful, Megan. Okay.
All
You're
right.
on the hot seat. If you saw this thing, are you going to report it or remain anonymous? Because I know Brooke already said anonymous. I think I'd go anonymous. Megan, what do you think?
I feel like I would probably keep anonymous, but I would definitely not keep quiet about it because I feel
Okay.
like I would
yeah.
be so dumbfounded that I saw this huge thing that I've never seen before that I feel like I would
Mm-hmm.
just be like asking all around about what it could possibly be. And that kind of
Mm-hmm.
leads me into another thought that I had. A lot of these people are kind of seeing different things. So my
Right.
thought is it multiple creatures, in kind of the same family, or is it just that you didn't really get a chance to get a good look at it? Because I'm wondering,
Right.
did these people get like 2 seconds, 3 seconds to look at it?
Well,
Or,
yeah,
in the
that's a
cases
good one.
where,
Yeah, good
yeah,
point.
they were staring, like the
Good point.
Mothman was staring at them, you got a good look at it. So I was wondering if
Mm-hmm.
maybe people are seeing different things just because their brains didn't have a good chance to
Mm,
really take it in. Plus,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I just saw this crazy thing. And then your mind starts playing tricks on you. It's like,
mm-hmm.
is that really what I saw? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
must be making that up. So I can see why
Right.
people would be like, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody. Like, people will think I'm crazy.
Right.
Mm,
Because you definitely, I think, if you don't get like a good look at it, I think your mind kind of fills in the blanks a little bit.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Yes,
but
it
it
does.
does, it's interesting that the people who kind of describe having like that, the people where there were 2 sightings within an hour, like they both got a pretty good look at it. We're like staring at it up in the sky for a long time. And they both described it almost identically to each other. So it does seem like if the longer you look at it, or like the more, more time you have, the more like accurate, I guess you can describe it. But yeah, it's very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And now we have one in Mineral Point? Oh,
yes.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's coming back.
Very, very interesting. Yes. Is that the next thing? I think we're coming up. Yeah, Mineral Point sighting. So this again was in 2019, and this was interesting. This one was a little different. So a woman reported seeing two feathered creatures, both 7 to 8 feet tall, and she said that they were arguing with each other. So
naturally,
yeah, that's the vibe that she got. I don't think she heard them, but she said they looked like they were arguing with each other.
Okay.
I mean, and they still can argue with each other. Why not?
Yeah, it's true. They might be having a disagreement, and
or two people in Big Bird costumes. Maybe
maybe
a little weird.
But she did say, so this would, maybe not costumes, because she said that they were actually like fading in and out of like existence, almost like they were like flickering. Yeah, which is very interesting, because I think that there's a lot of, even Lon himself, I think, thinks that these aren't like flesh and blood like creatures, but there's some kind of like, world jumping, I don't know, like corporeal forms of some sort, which I think a lot of people sort of think of Mothman, because it seems very unlikely that there would be some kind of 7-foot man-shaped bird, and we don't have any sort of like bones or like remains from a creature like that if they're just flying around Chicago. So most people, I think, kind of subscribe to the idea that they're not really here, like they're here, but they're not like physical beings that we could like catch and like or like kill or whatever. But so it's kind of interesting to me that she described actually physically seeing them like fading in and out of existence, like maybe they were I don't know, in one place and another place at the same time. I don't know. And this woman actually had a second encounter in that same year with what she described as a large winged gargoyle. She said with a 25-foot wingspan, which is crazy. Yeah. And she said this creature. Yeah. Can you imagine? That would be terrifying. That's like a dragon. But she said that this being was perched on top of the Mineral Point Opera House across from her, and or near it. I think she was at the Opera House, and then it was across the street from her, like kind of looking down at her. I think that this woman actually works with Lon now, because she reached out to him and they like got to know each other, and she, I think, might write for the website now, which is kind of cool. But also Mineral Point having an opera house is interesting to me. That town has like 2,000 people in it, but cool. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun that she's from Mineral Point. We just talked about Mineral Point, so definitely a lot of weird things going on there. And yeah, like you said, John, maybe the Mineral Point vampire was Mothman this whole time. He was like up in the tree and
which for the record again was not me.
Right, was not John.
Yelling at people and berating them and jumping down and jumping over a 10-foot wall. That was not me. But then again, you cannot prove that I wasn't there. So I'm kind of...
That's true. Yeah.
I'll keep it going and see if people, whatever.
You haven't given us an alibi yet, but that's okay.
There's no alibi.
We don't believe you.
This one, so now we're in 2020. There were 18 sightings in 2020, and I'm excited for this one, especially for Megan, because there was a sighting in Oregon, Wisconsin.
Wonderful. My hometown.
Yes. So 2020 on Thanksgiving night. So this was reported by the Singular 14 Society, so that group in Madison. And essentially, this was two young women. I think they're like 19, 20, so pretty young, and they said they saw an 8 to 9 foot tall winged person around 10:30 p.m. and it swooped down towards their car at the intersection of Sandhill Road and Dunn Town Line Road. Are you familiar with this location?
That's about 5 minutes from my house, so I'm a little.
Is it really?
I'm a little scared right now.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like surrounded by farmland, so maybe that's like its habitat. It's pretty,
well, that's what
rural.
That's kind of what they said, is that it was like standing out in a field, and I think they even said at first they thought they were like, oh my god, is that Bigfoot? And weirdly, that was not the only time that someone had experienced that, because they said it was like brown and furry, which again, not like the other Mothmen of like Chicago that we were like just talking about. This seems to be a different thing, because it was brown, furry, with like they said with no neck, and yeah, that it was just standing out in a field, kind of being like ominous, and then it like spread its wings and like flew towards them. And they also describe other weird experiences. So they said that there was weird radio interference that night. And they kept like driving around the town trying to see it again. And they also saw deer acting very strange. So they saw at least 7 deer like fleeing from the area where they saw this creature. So very odd.
Hold on, Brooke. So wait a minute. Hold on. Let me get this straight. There's 2 young women. They're driving around. They see this creature that's with no neck and red eyes, and they'll be like, "Hey, Sally, yeah, Julie, let's just drive around and see if we can find him or her. Yeah, that'd be really cool, wouldn't it?" Come on.
I mean, there's not much to do in Oregon, John. You gotta keep yourself entertained somehow.
We're all here. We love the paranormal, as we said a million times. Even both of us would probably be like, or all of us would be like
freaked out.
Brooke, Megan,
like,
maybe
I'm going
we should, I don't know, leave.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you read this account, I don't like I don't know that I like think that they absolutely didn't see something, but the way that they talk about it is kind of like, I mean, they sound nonchalant, like teenage girls, to be honest. Yeah, very nonchalant. And I'm like, really? Like, this is like a life mind altering experience. And they're just kind of like, yeah, we were like running around looking for it. We were trying to find it again. I'm like, oh, it's interesting. I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty funny. I would recommend reading that article because
I will. Yeah,
it's definitely interesting.
That's crazy that happened on Thanksgiving night in 2020, because I would have been home at that time because it was during the pandemic. So we were all at our homes. So there was a sighting literally 5 minutes from my house.
And you didn't even know it, right?
Yeah. Let's keep it that way. Crazy. I'm a little scared.
Right? I don't know if I really want to see it. Especially, if I'm out and about, like in Chicago and see it, sure. But like, I don't really want to see it outside my house.
Hey, Megan, come on. I want you tonight. I want you to go out there all alone around 1:00 in the morning with a flashlight. And I want you to start. Come on. It's for the show, Megan. Let's go.
All right. Well, you guys are going to have to go on without me then, because I probably won't make it.
She'll probably just pass away.
So long story short, we're a 2-person podcast now.
Oh my gosh.
I'll keep you updated.
No, don't do that. Thank you.
Also, sorry, my cat just jumped onto my lap. You might have heard him meowing in the background, but
that's okay.
We love him.
He's hanging out. Pippin's hanging out. So Oregon. Maybe we should do an investigation.
Yes, we will. Next to Old Man Weary.
I'm down.
Old Man Weary. What was Bloody Bridge and the little kids screaming, "Mommy, help me." We got it. We got
a lot of stuff.
We got like a whole road trip now.
We got a whole road trip. Yes,
that's true. Oh man. So moving on. 2020, actually 2019, kind of. There suddenly seemed to be a huge influx in sightings that occurred in around O'Hare International Airport, like tons of them. I think there were, I think I have it later on, but in total 37 of the sightings, at least kind of looking at the map, there are about 37 sightings near O'Hare, and about 95% of them occurred between 2019 and today. So tons of sightings all of a sudden in the O'Hare area, which were not really happening before this. So in 2020, there was one woman, and I found this like outside of the Phantoms and Monsters website, so I wanted to mention it, but this was kind of just like very vague. But a woman said that she was driving near O'Hare Airport, and she was stopped because she saw a 7-foot tall being with glowing red eyes making chirping and rapid clicking noises at her. So again, they all kind of seem to make these weird noises. Yeah. And so she was spooked by that. And that, I think, was one of the earlier sightings in the O'Hare area. But something that a little bit more interesting is that in July of 2020, wait, no, is this? Yeah, this is still 2020. Okay, just have to keep going back, making sure I'm the right year. So July of 2020, this creature was actually seen by an air traffic controller. And so this guy said that he had been working at O'Hare for 7 years. And he's had some weird experiences, but he said this was by far the weirdest thing he's ever experienced. And he only saw this one time. But basically, air traffic controllers have to take like mandatory breaks every once in a while because they need to make sure their awareness is, they're very alert and everything, because obviously very high stakes are associated with their job. Yes, we know, if you've seen Breaking Bad, we know what happens when a air traffic controller is distracted. He was on one of his mandatory breaks and he went for a walk outside near one of the terminals. And while he was out there, he saw a 7-foot tall, dark shaped like a man near a light pole that was within 20 to 25 feet of him. And he said that it seemed to almost be like resting. Like it almost looked like a guy just kind of standing there with his head facing towards the ground. He didn't notice that he was there. And he said there were actually like 3 other people that were also near him. And they were all looking at this thing just kind of like dumbfounded.
Okay.
And so they were looking at it for maybe like a minute. And then a service vehicle came, like a baggage truck or something like that came. And the creature saw the lights of this vehicle and its head kind of like snapped up. And they all saw that this creature had like these piercing red eyes. And then it kind of like spread its wings and flapped twice and disappeared into the air once it saw that truck, because it was like spooked by it. And so this person said, like this was the most bizarre experience he's ever had while he was at work. And he also said that he knows of at least 3 other air traffic controllers and 3 pilots who have had similar experiences, which he said he did not even, he heard about those experiences before and he didn't like fully believe them until he saw it himself. That being said, in May 31st, so this was actually before, so this might have been one of the pilots that he was talking about. There was a pilot who saw this creature and reported it as well. So this guy, and by the way, like Lon always like verifies the identities of these people. Like he asks for like verification that they've worked at O'Hare, like verification that they are who they say they are, that their job is what they say they
That's good.
which is great too. Yeah. So this was an airline pilot, and I have like these direct quotes from him because I thought it was kind of interesting just hearing his firsthand experience. So he said, I was flying into O'Hare International Airport at approximately 7:30 a.m. that morning, which was May 31st. As we're taxiing off the active runway and toward the terminal, I spotted something out of the corner of my eye. I turned to see a large black human-like creature fly up and into the sky. I saw this creature for about 4 seconds before he flew up and above the cockpit window and out of my sight. I immediately shouted it out for my co-pilot, who caught a glimpse of it before he flew out of sight. We were both awestruck by the sighting, and it left us completely dumbfounded. I radioed the incident into ATC, who made a note of it, and the rest of the flight was uneventful, and we disembarked. As we disembarked, our passengers without an incident. I brought this incident up amongst my colleagues online and was told by several other pilots that they had either seen or heard from others who have had this exact experience and seen the same thing that we saw. So I thought that was really interesting. He also later told Lon, when asked, that he couldn't really say much else about what the creature looked like, except that it was human-shaped and it had large black wings and that it wasn't a bird. And, from a pilot, I'm sure, like, he's seen a lot of birds as he's been taking off. Like, imagine, like, you've probably experienced everything you would think you would see as a pilot. And then to see that and be weirded out by it, like, that's pretty significant.
Yes, that is.
So lot of weird stuff going on around O'Hare. And actually in 2021 was a little bit slower with only 10 sightings, but almost all of them were at O'Hare Airport. And this one, John, I believe you said you had heard about this one. So July of 2021, at O'Hare, there were a group of employees. So at least 8 employees saw this creature. They were all like unloading baggage from one of the planes. And they said like a man-sized creature was standing by a fence as they were unloading the plane. And all of their supervisors, I guess, saw it as well and asked them not to say anything. So did you have anything else on that, John, that you knew
No,
of?
I think I sent it to you a while ago before we even decided we wanted to do this episode. And no, other than he's just a normal guy. There's
Right.
nothing for him to be like, oh, I'm going to make an extra couple $1,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's where I thought, I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's not going to make that up, especially, with baggage handlers. They don't have all day to, like, sit
Right.
there around, flight, especially on O'Hare. Flights are
Yeah, you're
coming in.
busy.
Yeah. So if you just get a smoke break and you're kind of looking, you're like, whoa. I mean, that's kind of one of those stories that you have to at least take a second look at and say, this guy could be telling the truth.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, I think like multiple of his coworkers had also kind of reported it, but they all reported it anonymously because they like genuinely feared that they would like lose their jobs if they like had been open about it, which is really interesting to me as well. I know that's kind of a thing with like weird things that happen like with airlines. And yeah, there's like a whole separate story completely not about Mothman at all, but I know like there was a certain airline where they had taken parts of a crashed plane and put them on all these different like the working parts they use for different airplanes. And on those airplanes, people were having like really weird, like spooky experiences of like seeing like ghosts and stuff. And like flight attendants and pilots and stuff were experiencing this, but they were basically being told like, do not report this or like you'll lose your job.
So,
my God.
So it's really interesting. Like it seems like airlines specifically like really want to keep that stuff under wraps. And but like think about how much weird stuff you might see as like a pilot. Like I'm sure that they that people see weird stuff like while they're flying because like you can see everything from up there. So I don't know. It's kind of odd, but
and I'm convinced there are hundreds of stories like this where people just don't say anything because they're like, well, I don't want to lose my job and I don't want to be like being with a therapist for the rest of my life.
Right, exactly.
But I saw what I saw. I think that the whole, and once we get into bigger and better subjects, we will see that a lot where people said, hey, I've known this since I've been 15 years old and I didn't want to say anything. And now they're like in their 60s.
Finally saying something. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm sure there's a lot more, which on top of it is insane when you think about, let's say there's 80 more sightings that people haven't talked about. Wow. That's
crazy. Good point.
For sure. And I mean, especially I think when you talk about like pilots, because they obviously like can't lose their job. They're so specialized, right? And you don't want to be like the pilot who's like unhireable because like what else are you going to do? You've spent so much money becoming a pilot that you don't want to like shake the, rattle the chains or whatever. I don't know what euphemism, but it's really interesting. I'm interested to see if there's like a subreddit or something where like pilots anonymously post about like the weird stuff. It'd be kind of cool to look into. Yeah. But yeah, so that was 2021. 2022, I like didn't grab any specific experiences. I was kind of running out of time to do research because I was getting so into this. But 2023, this year, there has been 3 sightings so far. And so I want to talk about a couple of them. There was one on January 15th that was actually another O'Hare experience. So this was actually a fireman who spotted O'Hare or who spotted the Mothman at O'Hare. He described it as in a very similar way as everyone else. So being 7 feet tall with at least a 15-foot wingspan, glowing red eyes, and making rapid clicking noises. And then interestingly, so this was the experience from just about a week ago, at least at the time that we're recording this. So February 5th, 2023, multiple witnesses experienced this. So they were in I guess it was after work, and this was in the Little Village Plaza. So they were out in like an alley. This was again like downtown. And I guess they hang out there like every day, but this day there was a large thing perched on top of one of the buildings. It had red eyes and it was kind of staring at them. They all felt super uneasy about it. And then eventually it just like, again, flew straight up into the air, like flapped its wings a couple times and kind of disappeared into the night. So again, so many people have experiences like that. It's crazy. But so that kind of brings us to the present. Again, there's so many other sightings. I would really recommend like going through the map and just kind of reading through some of them, because I just kind of was clicking random ones and being like,
Right.
oh, that's interesting. I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
that. But there's so many I didn't even get a chance to read, so we can definitely like come back to this and talk about it. But it's really fun.
We will
It's really interesting.
absolutely come back to this, Brooke.
Yeah.
And you know what we have to do, Megan and Brooke? And I know maybe we're stealing this from other people, but we're gonna have to do a top 5 of like Mothman, Bigfoot, Loch
Yeah,
Ness,
top 5 cryptids.
Hodag, you know,
I'm down.
or maybe
Definitely.
right, or maybe like a top 5 sightings, or like we talked about, a Mothman update.
Yes.
And kind of mention
Yeah.
that in our episodes in the
For
future.
sure. Yeah, I think it'd be fun if we can find like a couple more things that we didn't talk about yet and just kind of touch on it. It'd be fun. It'll be a good time. I'm sure that there will continue to be sightings of the Chicago Mothman. It seems like he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So
no.
So that's awesome. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, so that's all the sightings that we're going to talk about today, but I wanted to chat about some of the theories against, or like not really against, but some of the theories that people have come up with over the years to explain like what this might be, if not an actual Mothman. The number one that I always see, and I saw the same thing with the Point Pleasant Mothman, is that, oh, it's a sandhill crane, which always just annoys me.
No, it isn't.
I know. I'm like, okay, so if you don't know what a sandhill crane is, because we experience them a lot in the Midwest, but they can be about 3 to 4 feet tall. They're very large birds. Their wingspans can be up to 7 feet tall, and they do have red markings around their eyes. So I think people are like, oh, red markings. Yeah, this is what people are seeing. And the other thing too is they make this very strange noise. It's described as a rattling bugle call.
Yeah.
I tried to look it up. I'm like, how would you even describe it? They make an odd noise. But the thing is that, the thing is though, like people in the Midwest know what a freaking sandhill crane looks like. Like we see them, we see them all the time. Also, sandhill cranes have very long necks, which directly conflicts with the fact that most people say this creature has no neck. And like even if like this explains like maybe 5% of sightings, like there's no way, there's no way that this is like the majority of sightings. There's just no way.
I wouldn't go with that.
No.
I can tell you, just jumping in really quick, right down the road for me, I have sandhill crane armies. They're all over the fields near me. In fact, I can say this: it can't be. Mothman cannot be a sandhill crane, because one time when I was coming home from work, these 2 sandhill cranes flew right over my windshield. They were right on the next to the road. I drove past them, and I'm thinking, I'm going to hit these stupid cranes. And they flew right over my car. They were mere inches from my windshield. No, I'm like, come on.
It wasn't,
not even close. I was scared. I was like, stupid sandhill crane.
Right.
Come on.
Plus they're large, but they're not that large.
Right. Yeah. Like I know, I'm sure some people could maybe like over exaggerate, but like
you would have
3 to 4 feet is a much it's a huge difference from like 7 to 8 feet. Like there's just, I don't know. Again, like I could buy that maybe like 5% of these people maybe saw a crane and maybe they were new to the area, hadn't seen one before. Yeah, but like certainly not everyone. So I think that one's stupid. Another one people talk about is like an evolutionary adaptation, I guess, is like we tend to see human-like shapes where there are none because it draws our attention to possible threats, which I guess sure, but like why would we just randomly see human-like shapes in the middle of the sky if it's just a bird or something? This one was kind of interesting. People say, that we're priming ourselves to see Mothman because we know about Mothman, or we want to see him because he's like popular in pop culture. But something I want to point out is that in 2017, that wasn't really true, because first of all, that that Mothman Prophecies movie came out in 2002, so way earlier than this. But also, even like the Point Pleasant Mothman, there was like a couple documentaries released. One of them There was ones in 2011, 2017, and 2020, but none of them were popular.
No.
And then the BuzzFeed Unsolved Mothman episode, I feel like kind of did spark quite a bit of intrigue in Mothman, but that even didn't come out until April of 2018. And then I thought this was kind of fun, and Megan would appreciate this. I actually looked up the mentions of the word Mothman according to Keywords Everywhere and Google Trends.
Okay.
And the Mothman, like the use of Mothman in like search terms across the United States actually dipped in 2017 nationally and then picked back up in 2018 after that BuzzFeed Unsolved episode came out.
Okay.
So really, yeah. So really there was no reason for like 2017 to specifically be like, you know, the time when everyone started talking about Mothman, because it wasn't like he was popular in pop culture at that time. So
Brooke, you got me. Now you got me all absorbed in this Mothman thing. So
yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something. What is the largest bat in the world, you may ask?
Oh,
Flying
yeah,
fox.
it would be a flying fox. Yeah.
Flying fox. So what they get to, they're not even around here. They're like in Australia and other places like that. But their wingspan is only 6 feet, and they have a length of about 16 inches. So,
oh yeah,
I mean, that's a huge flying fox. I mean, if it would be that, and to be in Chicago, there's no way, because they eat fruit. They're pretty docile.
I'm pretty sure that we don't even really have flying foxes in the US. They're more like
Australia, you know, warmer places. So like
I love them. I think flying foxes are so cute, by the way. But but yeah, I don't really see like any. But I think the sandhill crane is the only even remotely plausible one, like for animals in the Midwest, of like what maybe would explain some of the sightings. But like there really isn't anything else. Like maybe a bald eagle. I don't know, but even that, like people, like you know what a bird looks like. Like people know what birds look like. I don't know. You wouldn't see a bald eagle and describe it as a gargoyle.
No way. No.
Yeah. So another explanation is that it's some kind of hoax. So maybe someone's pulling some kind of prank. I know. And this is stupid too. Yeah, especially because like this happened over such a long period of time. And also I looked it up, and apparently because a lot of people say, oh, maybe it's a drone, but drones didn't really become like common for public use until 2013. And even then, like no one really had one. But like there were, you know, a lot of sightings before 2013. And so for it to be like this long-standing hoax where this guy's just been trying to prank people for like 20 years, that seems very unlikely.
It's a pretty long prank.
Yeah, for sure. I already mentioned this, but I did say that, like, you know, the Point Pleasant Mothman seems to have been connected to the Silver Bridge collapse. But so far, I don't want to say so far, nothing bad has happened in Chicago, and I don't think anything will. I'm not trying to wish some kind of infrastructural calamity on Chicago.
Even though the Bears suck, we don't want anybody
you know, we don't want but other than that, I love Chicago.
Yeah, other than that, we love Chicago. So, you know.
For sure. And then I just want to mention, because a lot of people try to debunk this, but just some things that I think kind of give more like credence to like the Chicago Mothman and all of that is a lot of these accounts come from really reputable sources. So like we have seen firefighters, police officers, pilots, air controllers, like people who have, you know, a good head on their shoulders, who are like kind of meant to be like skeptical, meant to be like have seen a lot of stuff in their lives. Are actually seeing this stuff, which is really interesting. And a lot of the witnesses line up with each other. Like a lot of their accounts line up with other accounts in terms of the appearance of the creature and the behavior of the creature. And a lot of those people didn't even really know about Lon beforehand. So it's not like they were reading all these other accounts and then like trying to match it. It's like, you know, they had this experience and then some random person was like, hey, this guy might listen to you, and they were relaying their experiences to him or to someone else.
Right.
Yeah. And also like the clusters of appearances I think is really interesting, like in small, like not even like Chicago specifically, but just outside of Chicago, like, oh, there were 4 right here within the same time frame and all of that. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that this is some kind of hoax, or do you think this is like legit? What do you think this is? John, what do you think?
So, believe it or not, I'm going to give a yes on this. And the reason why is just because there's something going on here that just doesn't make sense. That
Yeah.
so many people are saying they see it, and yes, sure, there are people could be like, "Oh, it's a sandhill crane, you moron." Oh yeah,
Right.
sorry, you got a right. Okay, that does happen. Or oh, my eyes played tricks on me, but I don't know. I mean, there's just so many, and it's really similar to like Bigfoot, where it just keeps coming up over and over and over. I mean, he's the the big cryptid of all time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Bigfoot has been around forever, and people have said yes and no, and then right, and it's just been kind of up and down. But people still seeing it, and people keep faking it, and like won't let it go. And this is like, wow, that's a long prank. I mean, you really got to get involved to really do this. And then why not somebody come out like the Loch Ness monster? People have come out and said on their deathbed, "Oh, I just was pulling a prank on somebody, and
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry." Or they've come out in their deathbed about other cryptids. "Oh, I was just having a little fun. I guess it got out of hand. I never meant for that to happen." So
Right.
I'm going to give a yes on this, but I am just, oh my goodness, what could this be? So I'm going to pull out my nerdy hat right now because I'm a nerd and I play video games. So in the Batman series of comics, there is a creature called Man-Bat. And Man-Bat was developed by this scientist who was trying to help Batman. And long story short, he screwed up and turned himself into a bat.
Nice.
And then he goes around flying around Gotham, scaring the what out of people. And Batman's trying to help him and everything like that. But I thought, wait a minute, where did they get that from? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
You didn't just
Right.
make that up, did you? Or did
and
you?
Man-Bat's character, even more nerdy, has only been around since the about 70s, 80s, something like that. So it hasn't been around a long time. So yes, some imagination on their hand, but still, it was like, man, that is eerily similar to what this thing is, because he never really hurts anybody. He just scares people, just flies around in Gotham. And everybody's like, oh my God, look at that thing. So yeah, I'm gonna say yes. Megan, what do you think?
Honestly, I'm inclined to agree with you. And I think one thing that really sticks out for me is those reputable sources, as
Yeah,
Brooke says, firefighters, police officers, pilots, air
right.
controllers. Like these are people who they get to work, they're going to do their job, they're straightforward. They don't have time to
Right.
mess around and,
Yeah, they
make
don't.
up stories like that. Cause like think about this. Do you just like go about your day being like, oh, I'm gonna make up a story about a flying
Right.
7-foot
Because
bat
I'm
that I
bored.
saw?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I don't
Why?
I just feel like it seems more plausible when it's coming from people who
Mm-hmm.
don't typically
And
mess
multiple
around.
people.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like the ocean almost. It's like the ocean is filled with a bunch of things we don't really understand. It's like maybe
Yeah.
this is something, land-based that we just don't understand. But something interesting is you keep saying that it makes clicking noises. That's almost like what bats use to
Yes.
navigate, like
Okay.
sonar.
Yeah, like
So
sonar. Yeah.
maybe it is, something similar to a real bat. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, that is true.
So, Brooke, you have put hours into this. Great episode. So, give us a
did.
conclusion. You have a great
Yeah.
conclusion here.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, well, I would just say we might never know what these people are seeing,
Yeah.
but I think it's easy for people to decide they don't believe them until they've had an experience of
Sure.
their own. I think that seems to be very common, like with a lot of these stories. People will be like, "Oh, my coworkers were seeing it. I didn't really believe them, but then I had this experience, and I was like, oh crap, that actually happened." Like plenty of these witnesses seem to be completely normal Midwesterners who like they
Right.
want to remain anonymous. A lot of these people are anonymous, which in that case, it's like, well, what even is the benefit in coming forward if you're going to remain, if they're trying to like get clout or something like that, obviously they wouldn't remain anonymous. So, and we've seen that in a lot of cryptid stories, but I think like regardless, these people truly believe what they saw. And in total, Lon has documented 160 sightings. I believe there's probably a lot more than that, and I don't believe that all of these people are lying. Again, maybe 20% of them are, maybe but I think like with the amount of diligence he's put into making sure these people are who they say they are, and all of that, and kind of compiling different sources as well. It definitely seems like the majority of these are probably true encounters. They believe what they saw. And yeah, so this is fun too. So Lon Strickler is conducting a worldwide search called the Winged Humanoid Project. So he does want to hear your story. So if anyone out there has seen Mothman in the Chicago, if you've seen him in the Chicago or Lake Michigan area, you can contact him at Lon Strickler at phantomsandmonsters.com or check out his website. It's really interesting, really, really kind of fun stuff. And I personally hope that it is, it's all real. And I think it's all, at least there's some kind of truth behind it. Again, I'm kind of in the Lon Strickler sort of mindset where he doesn't necessarily think that there's some kind of physical being, but more like a reality jumping entity of some sort. But
I'll agree with you on that too, Brooke, because you kept saying that it will only like flap its wings, maybe 1 or 2, 3 times. That doesn't seem like how like a bird or a real bat would function. Like it just doesn't seem like it would have enough propulsion to actually fly.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know, something interesting with that.
Yeah. So I think in conclusion, and jump in here, tell me if I'm wrong. I think we believe in this, but we believe it's something that maybe is not a man bat, but something different. Maybe a different evolution. Maybe some person has a lot of free time on their hands,
right?
Which would be, like we said, that's a long prank you're taking. But I think it's interesting that no one has tried to catch it yet. I think that would be the next thing that I would see. Because they've been trying to catch Bigfoot and like Loch Ness and all the big cryptids for years, and to no luck, obviously.
That's true.
Yeah. So
it's actually something. Sorry, really quickly. There was I think it was in the NPR article. They actually interviewed this person who was like some kind of zoologist, and they were like, "Hey, do you think that this thing could be real?" And he was kind of like it seems very unlikely that like a Mothman would be like a real creature that we haven't discovered yet, because again, like we would have seen something, we would have some kind of evidence or some kind of DNA, some kind of remains of this creature. And it's interesting to me because he actually said that he thinks that there's a much better case for like Bigfoot being like a real actual creature that exists somewhere. But again, I don't think that necessarily means that like these Mothman sightings aren't real or anything. I just think it maybe is something like different. Like maybe catching Bigfoot is like a more viable course of action, because maybe Bigfoot is actually like a real flesh and blood being who like eats. Because I'm like, I've never heard anyone describe like what a Mothman would like eat. I guess they're like, how would you catch it?
Yeah.
Does it eat? I don't know.
I was like, maybe they don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
So this has been a jam-packed, wonderful 10th episode. Shout out to Brooke for doing all this great research, and Megan, for helping out and doing everything with the podcast and with the episodes and everything. You guys have been great. But this is what I want to say. If you've had an experience, hey, we want to believe you, right? Okay, so dairylandfrights@gmail.com. Hey, email us, send us an experience. We're going to put some of these pictures out, correct, on Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, so check out our Instagram. And like I said, check out our past episodes about some of the cryptids, as my new name for Brooke is the Cryptid Queen.
I like that.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna take that.
So please, we love you guys all. We have been growing here, so thank you so much. Like I said, we're a homemade show, and we love to see. Hey, Megan and Brooke, we have people in France and Nigeria listening to us.
Wow,
awesome!
That's cool.
Very cool.
So yes, it's awesome. And And we do have people in California, shout out to California and Wyoming and East Coast. So we are growing, and we only can do this if you help us out, right? If you can continue to listen and, like I said, continue to suggest topics. Maybe there's certain monsters or cryptids in your area that we don't know about. Please, send us at, like I said, dairylandfrights@gmail.com. So anything else to add, Megan and Brooke?
No, I think you covered it. I would love if people would suggest topics, because it's fun. It's fun when it's stuff that people maybe don't know a ton
Right.
about. That's why I was excited about this one, because I don't think a lot of people know about the Chicago Mothman. So
No.
it's fun to talk about that kind of stuff.
Megan, what do you think? Anything else?
Well, this was awesome, Brooke. I see all the hard work you put into this, and I think it just goes to show that there are, different things that you can look into in your area. Chances are there probably is a cryptid or an unexplained happening in your area. I didn't know about the Chicago Mothman, but really that's only a few hours from here, so it's
and it happened 5 minutes from you.
yeah.
And
Thanksgiving, I like it.
Megan, do not do that, by the way. Do not go up by yourself.
Oh,
Please
dang
don't
it.
do that.
All right, John, since you told me to, I won't.
Awesome. So with that, another great show. We have a Valentine's Day episode coming up too. So be prepared to listen to that. One of our mini episodes. We're excited about that. Share a little bit of fun. We're gonna have a little fun with that episode. So again, like we say, say hi to your ghost for us. But if you see the Mothman, say hi to Mothman, because he needs love too. All right, Megan and Brooke, another great show. Love you. We will talk later.
Sounds good.
All right, till next week.
This is John from Dairyland Frights. And are you scared of your podcast hosting site? Well, not anymore, because with Podbean, you can get a free month of hosting for your podcast. And also, yes, there's more. You can get $100 of free advertising for your podcast, where you can advertise on Dairyland Frights or in many other podcasts on Podbean. So don't be scared and come over to Podbean today. And you can go to Dairyland Frights, podbean.com. That's Dairyland Frights, podbean.com. So don't be scared. Come over to Podbean. We love it. You'll love it too.